82b. Had a very interesting discussion yesterday.
Yeah.
About where do we know that you can't bring karbanos from Meiser? So we said we learned it from a Korban Pesach. Just like the Korban Pesach, Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Just like a Korban Pesach cannot be brought from Meiser. Why couldn't it be brought from Meiser? Because they didn't live in the land of Israel when they first brought the Korban Pesach. When they were in Egypt. There's no Meiser. Meiser is only from the grain that comes from Israel. So just like the first Korban Pesach couldn't come from Meiser, so to all the rest of the Korban Pesach couldn't come from Meiser. And from that we learned to the other Karbanos. Rabbi Kiva asked Rabbi Lezer, over there it was impossible. You didn't have Meiser. That's not a real limud. You didn't have Meiser because you weren't in the land. So Rabbi Eliezer said it's still a good proof. So then Rabbi Kiva says, the first Korban Pesach, you had no application of blood on the altar. The other later generations, you put the blood on the altar, and maybe that's a good reason why you should be able to bring it from Meiser. The later generations, it's very different. First generation, they put the blood on the doorpost, not on the altar. The first Korban Pesach. So Rabbi Eliezer responds, that we learn everything from the first Korban Pesach. Any questions? Okay. We're going to start from Rabbi Akiva. It's 4 lines down on 82b. Rabbi Akiva, what happened over there in the conversation? Rabbi Eliezer says, we're going to learn from the first Korban Pesach. Rabbi Akiva says, you can't learn from there because that was impossible. There was no Meiser. So he says, no, you can still learn. And then Rabbi Akiva goes on to say some other story about the you can't compare because this one has applications of blood and that one doesn't. Why is he changing his claim? Just say that you can't learn from there because it's a yefsher. So maybe Rabbi Eliezer convinced Rabbi Akiva that you can learn from the first Korban Pesach. It was impossible. There was no Meiser to take it. It's no proof that later generations. Somehow he convinced him that it's not a problem. That's still a good lima. So why does Rabbi Akiva not be convinced? This is like saying my custom is not to use a cell phone. Why? Because my father and my grandfather didn't use a cell phone. It's not a good proof. They didn't have a cell phone. Maybe if they had, they would have used it. So this Rabbi Eliezer is saying we can't bring a Korban Pesach from Meiser. Why? Because my great grandfather in Egypt didn't bring from Meiser. He said, he didn't have Meiser. He was in Egypt. Meiser's in Israel. So maybe after that, Rabbi Eliezer says, no, that's still a good proof. So Rabbi Akiva, maybe he changed his mind, maybe he accepts Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, and now he brings another proof. What's his other proof? He says, well, in Egypt they didn't apply the blood to the altar. Mishum Haipircha. Because of the question, they didn't apply the blood to the altar. So that's why they weren't allowed, that's why they didn't bring from Meiser. They didn't have Meiser either. But in the later generations where they applied the blood to the altar, then maybe you can use Meiser to bring a Korban Pesach. We're talking about the Meiser is the tenth that was brought to Jerusalem to spend in Jerusalem.
He says over here something very nice. Okay. He says that Rabbi Lezer answered him about Efsher. He said the whole source of Korban Pesach is Pesach. Tell me Efsher Sheyefsher, that's the foundation of the whole Korban Pesach.
We don't know it from anywhere else. So that's what I'm saying. that is a nice idea. So the Gemara has a question on Rabbi Akiva's second proof. It says, you see, what's happening with the application of the blood is that there's another logic that's being thrown in here. There is one sacrifice that you're allowed to bring for Meiser. That's a shlamim. When you go to Yerushalayim and you want to buy meat, so you buy an animal, you bring it as a shlamim, and you eat the meat. And the Kayanim get some, and the Mizbeach gets some. So what we're saying is that we're able to. What we're saying is that we should be able to bring a Korban Pesach from Meiser, because the Korban Pesach in later generations, the blood is put on the altar just like a shlamim. It's very similar to a shlamim. And a shlamim I'm allowed to bring from Meiser. So that's Rabbi Akiva's second proof, that we should be able to learn from a Korban Pesach should be allowed to be brought from Meiser, because the blood is applied to the altar. So the Gemara says, but Pesach Midbar Yechiach. You see, this is interesting. We have a clear source where we have a Korban Pesach, that the blood was applied to the altar, and it was still not brought from Meiser. Which one was that?
Because there wasn't any.
Well, in the desert, because there wasn't any, true. But in Egypt, the blood wasn't applied to the altar. So Rabbi Akiva said that can't be a source.
There
was no altar.
No.
In Israel, that's what we're discussing. Can it be brought in Israel from Meiser? But I do have a source, a precedent of where the blood was applied to an altar, and it was still clearly not brought from Meiser, and that's Pesach in the desert, because we already built the altar, and they brought a Korban Pesach. They put the blood on the altar, and there was still no Meiser. So that's a way of questioning Rabbi Akiva's proof. Rabbi Akiva is saying that maybe in Israel we're allowed to bring a Korban Pesach from Meiser because we're applying the blood on the altar. Don't prove from Egypt. Just 1 second. That's not a good question, because in the desert we put it on the altar and we still didn't bring from Meiser. So the Gemara explains. L'dvar of the Rabbi Eliezer Kamar. Actually, what Rabbi Akiva is saying is he's saying that Rabbi Eliezer, I'm discussing your opinion. My opinion, I already stated. But even according to you, you should still accept my logic. Why? Lididi, this is Rabbi Akiva speaking, ain't done an efsher mishe efsher. I hold that you can't learn from Egypt, because there was no Meiser there. So, there was no Meiser to even discuss, are you allowed to bring from Meiser or not? But Lididach, but according to you, Rabbi Eliezer, the Amrit done an efsher mishe efsher, that you hold that you're allowed to learn from something that was impossible to something that is possible. That means that you're allowed to learn from Egypt, even though there was no Meiser. Possible. It was impossible there. There was no Meiser, because they weren't in Israel. To the land of Israel, where there is Meiser. And we're saying that because in Egypt there was no Meiser, so in Israel you're not allowed to use Meiser for the Korban Pesach, according to you. But however, Mala Pesach Mitzrayim, Shkin and Ton Matan Dam, and Beimur Megam Mizbeach, you nevertheless can't learn from there, because you can't learn because there was no blood applied to the altar. It's a different story. Here we have blood applied to the altar. It's similar to a shlamim. So you should be allowed to use Meiser. That on the Pesach of the later generations of the land of Israel, we apply the blood to the altar. It's like a shlamim. You should be allowed to use Meiser. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, I'm able to learn from Egypt. I have a pasuk that tells me that you will do the service of this month, that all the later services are exactly comparable to the first one. That means that we can learn from it anyway. The Gemara asks, we have a better answer. Why is he bringing the pasuk? He has a better answer. Why doesn't Rabbi Eliezer tell Rabbi Akiva that why are you telling me that there's a difference between the Pesach that's brought in Israel because it's put on the altar and the Pesach in Egypt, which was not put on the altar? It's not true. Pesach in the desert is exactly the same like the Pesach in Israel. in the Pesach in the desert didn't have Meiser. They weren't in the land of Israel yet to have Meiser. So it's a fake logic.
So they're exactly the same?
Well, what Rabbi Kiva is saying is that we can't, Rabbi Eliezer, you can't learn from Pesach in Egypt because the blood wasn't applied to the altar. So Pesach in the land of Israel, the blood is applied to the altar. You should be able to bring from Meiser just like a carbon shlamim. But it's a false logic because we have another precedent of a Pesach where the blood was applied to the altar, and they still didn't bring from Meiser, and that's Pesach in the desert. The first year in the desert, they built the altar. The second year, the following Nisan, they already had an altar, and they brought a carbon Pesach.
And they had Meiser in the desert?
And they did not have Meiser in the
But
desert.
did they even have that as an
They didn't have an option. But according to Rabbi Eliezer, that's not a problem. To Rabbi Akiva, that's an issue. But according to Rabbi Akiva is saying, but even according to you, Rabbi Eliezer, that you hold that you can learn from something that's impossible, you still can't learn from Pesach in Egypt because it wasn't applied to the altar. But Rabbi Eliezer should have responded, but in the desert it was applied to the altar and it wasn't with Meiser. So now the Gemara says, L'dvar of the Rabbi Akiva Kamar. Rabbi Eliezer is responding to Rabbi Akiva. Yes, it's true that he could have responded that, but he was telling Rabbi Akiva something. Lididi, done in Efsher, Mishi Efsher. I don't need any of those issues. I don't need them because I learned from Egypt, even though there was no Meiser. Are you going to tell me Mishum Hai Pircha, Pesach Midbar Yechiach? Lididi, done in Efsher, Mishi Efsher. I learned from, even though it was impossible, I can still learn from there.
This Rabbi Eliezer saying.
Right. However, Lididach, that you hold that you can't learn, that you learn from there.
Because they're Muri.
Because, you hold that.
Because they're Muri. He asked the question. By Pesach Mitzrayim there was no Muri.
Yeah, but he also doesn't learn Efsher Mishi Efsher. Lididi done Efsher Mishi Efsher.
Right.
So according to you, Rabbi Akiva, you can't learn from there anyway.
Right.
You're going to ask me? You're going to ask me that's because of the Imurim. Rabbi Akiva's responding. In other words, Rabbi Eliezer is going to respond to specifically Rabbi Akiva's question. So Pesach Midbar Yechiach, where we did have, it was applied, and there still was no Meiser, and there still was no Meiser. So, but Lididach, Damet ain't done an Efsher Mishi Efsher. But nevertheless, according to you, that you don't learn Efsher Mishi Efsher, you don't learn something that's possible from something that where it was impossible. I have a pasuk that tells you that you can, and that's Ve'avadata.
That's that pasuk.
It's going to prove to that. So the Gemara asks, "V'hashtanami lefrech." 1 second, you have a pasuk that says you learn from there, but Rabbi Kiva could say that yes, but I still can't learn from there because it was.
Yeah, Efsher Mishi Efsher.
It's now it's possible to bring from Meiser, and then it wasn't possible. I can't learn from a case where they didn't have it. I can't learn the rule if I'm allowed to bring a Pesach from Meiser from a situation where there was no Meiser at all. Some Rav Sheshas, they say Meres. This is Rav Sheshas responds that this teaches us Ein Mishivan ala Hekesh. You have a good question, Rabbi Akiva, but if I have a Hekesh, if I have a pasuk that tells me that this is how you're supposed to do it, you can't even ask good questions on a Hekesh.
She says over here,
Yeah, that's probably how it is, right?
So
It's a real Hekesh.
they're actually arguing if there's such a halacha l'Moshe Rabbeinu. Does Rabbi Kiva ultimately agree with
what
him?
do we say? Rabbi Kiva holds. I saw the commentators here responded to that point. Rabbi Kiva says.
So basically, they both agree that you can't learn Efsher Mishi Efsher.
No. Rabbi Eliezer holds that there was no problem. Rabbi Eliezer holds done Nefesh Mishi Efsher. This is only for Rabbi Akiva. He tells him the pasuk.
The Hekesh.
Yeah.
But I don't understand. Why do you go into logic if you have according to Reb Lezer? Why would he even argue with him about logic? Why didn't he say from the beginning?
Yeah, so just 1 second. Just to answer the first thing, Rabbi Akiva Savar and Tais was Rabbi Akiva Savar Filo Hachi ain't done nefshe mishiefshe even with the hekesh. Avalein learned leslie hekesha. That's what Tais says on the top. He still accepts the hekesh, but he holds that you can't learn if it's yefshe. Okay. I'm sorry. What was the next?
But Rav Shesha says clearly that that's correct.
Yeah.
So in other words, you don't argue on
right. And Rabbi Akiva would say
so
that I can't ask other types of questions, but this is a question where Efshe Mishiefshe, they simply didn't have it. I couldn't have asked another question, but this is, I have no proof. He's saying that so I can't even learn from it.
Arguing on Rav Shesha?
No. We have a machlekes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. If Efshe Mishiefshe is a kasha that I can ask on a hekesh. Notice, Rabbi Akiva accepts him.
Obviously, Rav Shesha is telling us that you can't.
Yeah, but
So
and that is
and usually when this is said, this is the halacha is like
is the
last
Zaysimeres the
one.
halacha. I'm not sure, but this is a type of question where Rabbi Akiva says this is. It's like saying that Amy Shivan ala Hekesh. So automatically everything is saying yes, it's automatic. However, there are certain things that don't go into that.
So then, why do we need Rav Shesha?
Because Rav Shesha is explaining what Rabbi Eliezer was responding. Okay. Tabitza Amar. Tabitza. You bring over here a beautiful thing in the note here. Tabitza, they say that this is the yeshiva that they're doing this interesting. It's sort of like political, the way they're explaining this. Some wanted to explain that Tabitza means that the Rabbanan Savaroi added this in later. Now, what happened was the scientific study of this, which was very popular in Germany and all of this, they claim that the Gemara wasn't really sealed by Rav Ashi. It's still like fluid.
There's people adding this.
And therefore, it sort of lends to, like, come on, Chazal were still editing, and we're still editing too. It gives a little like precedent for, and they say that the Rabbanan Savaroi, which were right after the Amoraic period, were still editing the Gemara. The Frum Rabbanim were always against that. So one of the things that they said, Tarbitza was the Rabbanan Savaroi. Tarbitza, they asked this. Tarbitza means like a courtyard, which must have been a type of yeshiva that was outdoors or something. And they're saying that why doesn't we find this so seldom? What it's saying is that there was some event where or some type of rabbis that they asked the following question. However, they bring here in the note that in Yitzchak Isaac Halevi, in the Deiros Rishonim, was a big fighter against these scholars. He says no. He says Tabitza was just a courtyard, and what would happen is that the Bnei Yeshiva were inside the Beis Medrash, and there were people that didn't make it in. For whatever reason, they weren't able to make it in. They would sit outside the Beis Medrash, and sometimes in the Gemara, if someone says a logic that they don't accept, Gemara says, Puktani Libra, go teach this outside, which meant like to the younger class. They were outside, it was like the lower, what do you call the first year in college? The
juniors.
Freshman.
Go tell it to the freshmen, that was the Tabitza. So here he's saying, that here we're quoting that they had a question. Tabitza Amar, if it's a hekesh, that means a type of way of comparing one rule to another rule. We learned in Zvachim.
Like jurisprudence.
It's they call it a juxtaposition. That it's one because it says it here and it says it there. Well, that's Gzeir Shava, but because we have this word next to something else, we can learn from it. So what we're saying is that if you learn Pesach from the original Pesach in Egypt, now how is Pesach going to tell me to all the other sacrifices? Because it's already one step removed. You can't jump like that. It has to be always an original source. We had this discussion in Zvachim. So the Gemara answers that B'chlala Itmar. Pesach is all one. We're not saying that from Pesach, the original Pesach, to the generation of Pesach, to all other Karbanos. We're saying all other Karbanos from Pesach, and all Pesach becomes one category. It does become a shlamim, but nevertheless, that's not. I think we're saying that.
That's not what he's trying to ask. When the question,
No. We're learning to all other karbanos, like a taida, or we said you can't bring. To the other sacrifices, it is a type of shlamim. But what we're saying is that when a person accepts on himself to bring.
So that's a new hekesh.
To bring a sacrifice, he can't pay it off with Meiser. That we're learning from anything that's an obligation. You can't pay off with Meiser. That we're learning from Pesach. But we learn from the original Pesach to the generational Pesach to other sacrifices. That's a problem because it's two steps removed. So we say that no, all Pesach is all one, and from there it's only one step to everything else. Pesach kula chada milsi. All of Pesach is just one. Okay. Now we have a question. Rabbi Kiva also holds that he can't use Meiser for obligatory sacrifices.
He does?
Yeah. But he just made this whole big deal that you can't learn it like Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer is learning from the original Pesach. He says he can't learn from there. They had no Meiser anyway. So where does Rabbi Akiva know it from? The Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva, Pesach de'ena ba'ela menachula and minolei. Where does he know that a korban Pesach is only brought from chulin? So
he's asking only for Pesach, not on the rest of the Shlom.
Right. Well, this is where it would start.
Okay.
And then we would go to Tzainu Bakar. Remember our Mishnah? In Kimat HaMalem Tzainu Bakar, Lahakish.
Okay.
So, Nafkale Mihada Amar Shmuel Mishum Rabbi Eliezer. He learns it from the same pasuk that Shmuel says in the name of Rabbi Eliezer a different drasha. Notice Rabbi Kiva is not going to accept Rabbi Eliezer's drasha entirely. He'll accept parts of it. But what we're doing is we're quoting a pasuk that Shmuel says that Rabbi Eliezer learns out a lot from this pasuk. Rabbi Akiva is going to use one of those items in this pasuk to teach us that a korban Pesach can't be brought from Meiser. But first we're going to go through this long explanation, which is not even Rabbi Akiva. It's still necessary for us to go through it, because Rabbi Akiva is going to accept certain parts of it. What's the pasuk? By the way, Rabbi Eliezer that we're mentioning here is the Rabbi Eliezer that Rabbi Akiva was arguing on.
Which is his
teacher, contemporary. Zayis hatayra la'ayla la'minch l'chatas l'ashem l'amalam azavach hashlamim. This is the pasuk. This is the Torah. These are the laws of the Eily, the Mincha, the Chatas, the Asham, the inauguration offering, and the peace offerings. Now we go through each word of the pasuk, because this is a very general pasuk which was not necessary for it to state. So Eily, when it says in this pasuk Eily, what it's coming to teach us is that all sacrifices have to have the rule of an Eily. Ma Eily tuna keli. Just like an Eily requires a vessel. Afkal ton keli. Also all other sacrifices require a vessel. Maihi. Which vessel are we referring to when we say that an Eily requires a vessel? Eily mizrak. If we say we're talking about a vessel to accept the blood, to catch the blood after the slaughtering, that we know from another source, by the communal peace offerings, which are brought on Shavuos. So it also says Vayasim Ba'aganis. Now why would we know this from an Eily? Because there was an Eily that was by Har Sinai where it says also, Vayalu Eilis, Vayasim Baganis. It says over there, vessel. So I know I need a vessel to catch it. We say, well, so what? We know it from Shlamim as well. You don't need a Naila to tell me this. Ella Sakin. When we say that you need a vessel, we're referring to that you need a knife to slaughter. Okay.
What else would you use to slaughter?
Well,
an axe?
Well, we're going to say that possibly things that were attached to the ground. Maybe you could bend over a reed or a rock that's still attached to the ground and use it. Where do we know that an Eily needs a knife? Abram took a knife to slaughter his son. And I know that that's an Eily. Why? Because when he found the ram, he says he's going to bring the ram as an Eily, a burnt offering, in place of his son. That means his son was an Eily. And his son, he took a knife. We're learning from an Eily that all other sacrifices require a knife. Taisvis asks over here that we find in Chulin that we use this source to teach me actually something else. You see, here we're saying that it needs to be a keli, that it needs to be a knife. Over there in Chulin we know that shchita needs to be talish, that it can't be attached to the ground. I'm confusing it with the two together. Okay. Yeah, if it would be just a sharp rock, then that would not be, even if it's detached, but a sharp rock wouldn't be considered a keli. And they did have sharp rocks, we find by...
But what if you made a knife out of a rock?
If it would become a keli, if it's made into a knife, then that would be a keli. Kli avanim, still a keli. It's not makabel tama. But we find by Tzipayrashi, by Yikach, so they use sharp, use like a flintstone. Mincha, wait, the next word in the pasuk. Ma mincha eina ne'achel asel zichri kuna. Just like a mincha is only eaten by kayanim, af kol ein ne'achol mal zichri kuna. Also, all sacrifices are only eaten by kayanim. Mar is asking, which sacrifices do you need to tell me are only eaten by kayanim? Ichatas vasham. If you're coming to tell me that I'm learning from a mincha that it's only eaten by a kayanim, without what's only chatas and asham over there behed yiksiv. It says clearly. So that, what does it say? It says l'chol hashamam v'kodesh hakadashim teichlenu. That it says that kol zachar b'kayanim yechlenu. It says over there that it needs to be male kayanim. Iziv chishal mitziber miribuya dekrasi b'kodesh hakadashim teichlenu kol zachar yoichal. Over there I have it from the extra wording in the pasuk that when it says b'kodesh hakadashim, it already says that it's only eaten by zichri kuna. So this extra pasuk is coming to teach me. It's coming to include shlamim. So what are you telling me that a carbon mincha is telling me that I need to eat sacrifice, that the kayanim can eat the sacrifices? I know that already from each of the other sacrifices. The Gemara says Tanai. Actually, I do have a discussion amongst Tanaim. In Ikad Mehacha. You're right. I do have other sources. Some learn it from the Ribuya Dekra, from the extra pasuk, and some learn it from Mincha. Now, usually, what the Gemara would do was the Gemara would say, well, according to the ones that learn from the Ribuya Dekra, what do they do with Mincha? And according to the ones that learn from Mincha, what do they do with the Ribuya Dekra, with the extra pasuk? So, but the Gemara just stops right here, and it says, this is Rabbi Eliezer's view. He does it like this. Chatas, we're up to the next word in the pasuk. Ma chatas mekach bebalua, afkol mekach bebalua. Just like the chatas, if it gets absorbed into other food, if that food gets the status of a chatas, and it's only eaten for one day and one night, and it becomes nicer if you leave it over, you have to burn it. That I learned from chatas. Asha, ma asham ein shpir v'shel yakadish bay, afkol ein shpir v'shel yakadish bay. Just like an asham, which is a male offering. So we say that the placenta, the fetus, is not sanctified. Why? Because it's a male offering. It doesn't have a placenta in the fetus. So too, every other animal, every other sacrifice, the placenta and the fetus are not. The embryo is not sanctified in it until after it's born. In other words, if you shechte an animal as a sacrifice, you open it up, you find inside there was an embryo. So we say that it's not sanctified. So who's saying this, by the way?
Who gets it? The Kohen or the Baalai?
Apparently it's chulin, so it would go to the Baalai. So Kasavar, he must hold, blood is kachim bav yasin in Kedoshim. That offspring of sacrifices only become holy after they're born. V'dan and efsher mishi efsher. And he also learns the possible from the impossible.
Because otherwise, why would he have to,
Because how do we know an ashram is not sanctified by the embryo? We say, well, because it doesn't have one, because it's male. So whose opinion is this? This is Rabbi Eliezer that we said before. He can learn that you can't bring meiser for a Korban Pesach because the original Korban Pesach didn't have meiser because they were in Egypt. So it's the same opinion. Miluim, the inauguration offering. Ma miluim Masreim b'sreifa, vein balachayim Masreim b'sreifa. Avkol Masreim b'sreifa, vein balachayim Masreim b'sreifa. What was left over from the miluim, what was left over till the morning was burnt. But if there were leftover live animals that were designated, they're not burnt, they're not put to death like that, you leave them to get a mum, and then you redeem them. So too, all other sacrifices, what's left over is burnt. But if it's live, then you just leave it to get a mum. Shlamim. What about the shlamim? What it says in the pasuk shlamim. What do we learn from that? What are we comparing it to all other sacrifices? Ma shlamim mefaglim mispaglim. Avkom mefaglim mispaglim. The shlamim is teaching me that not only is it pigul itself if he has the wrong thoughts, but even the things that come along with it become pigul as well. And it itself is pigul, and the thing that come along with pigul. Also, that would apply to other sacrifices as well. That what comes along with other sacrifices? The nesachim, the meal offering, and the shlamim could be the korban taida. The shlamim could be a korban taida that the breads that come along with it become pigul if he has the wrong thoughts by the shechita. So too other sacrifices, if he has the wrong thoughts by the shechita, the meal offering and the oil, the flour and the oil are also become pigul. So far, it didn't tell us anything. It didn't tell us what we're searching for. We're searching for what does Rabbi Akiva know that a korban Pesach can't be brought from Meiser?